بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So we continue inshaAllah ta'ala with the hadith of Abi Hurairah رضي الله عنه. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أنه قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا استيقظ أحدكم من منامه فليستنثر ثلاثا فإن الشيطان يبيت على خيشومه. متفق عليه. From Abu Hurairah رضي الله عنه that he said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, if one of you wakes up from his sleep, then let him expel water from his nose 3 times, for indeed the shaitan sleeps or spends the night within his nose or within his nasal passage. This hadith is muttafaqun alayh, narrated by Imam al-Bukhari and Muslim. And this hadith, and indeed the hadith that comes after it, have some extremely important points of fiqh and of usul in them. We'll cover the hadith that comes after it as well. وعنه رضي الله عنه إذا استيقظ أحدكم من نومه فليغمس يده في الإناء حتى يغسلها 3 فإنه لا يدري أين باتت يده. متفق عليه وهذا لفظ مسلم. If one of you wakes up from his sleep, then do not let him put his hand into the vessel until he washes it 3 times, for indeed he does not know where his hand spent the night. And this hadith is agreed upon, and the wording is that of Al-Imam Muslim. So with regard to our first hadith, the hadith of Abu Hurairah regarding the expelling or the drawing of the water into the nose and outwards, then we have a number of issues to cover within this hadith. The first is, if one of you wakes up from his sleep, if one of you wakes up from his sleep, the following hadith, and indeed this hadith in general and some of the other wordings of the hadith, indicate that the meaning of this is the sleep at night. The meaning of this is the sleep at night, and not the power nap that you have in the day for 5 minutes or half an hour, but the sleep that you have at night. فَلْيَسْتَنْثِرْ, let him do istinthar. When we said istinshaq is to draw the water into the nose, and istinthar is to cause the water to expel the water out of the nose. This command, فَلْيَسْتَنْثِرْ, is a command. It's in the form of a command, it's in the form of a verb which is an imperative. It's telling you have to do something. And the principle that we have in usul al-fiqh is al-amru yufid al-wujub. When you get a command, that command at a default level, at a general level in fiqh, when you get a command, that command indicates something that is wajib, unless you have a reason to make it mustahab or to make it permissible. So this is a really good principle in usul al-fiqh that we can benefit from as a general rule. Remember, it's not a universal rule that it works for everything and everyone, but as a general rule, al-amru yufidu al-wujub. A command, when you get a command, that command means that it is wajib for you to follow it, unless there is an evidence to suggest that this is not wajib. And that is why it seems the reason for the author to include, rahimahullah ta'ala, this hadith in Bulugh al-Maram, in Bab al-Wudu, is because he wants to indicate to you that the cleaning of the nose during the wudu is an obligation. And a person may say, well, it's not mentioned in the ayah. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِذَا قُمْتُمْ إِلَى الصَّلَاةِ فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ, wash your faces. So the ayah doesn't specify the nose, but the sunnah specifies the nose. And therefore, because the sunnah specifies it here, and because this is a command, the author is saying this is a command which indicates to you, along with the other ahadith, that it is an obligation for you to draw the water and expel the water from your nose. فَلْيَسْتَنْثِرْ ثَلَاثًا. Let him expel the water from his nose 3 times. The scholars disagreed over whether this is to be done outside of the wudu as well. So the mas'ala here is, okay, a person comes and they wake up from sleep and they don't want to make wudu and pray. Perhaps they wake up an hour before Fajr and they don't want to make wudu and pray. Or they wake up, they have prayed Fajr and maybe Fajr is very early there, they went back to sleep, they woke up again, they don't want to pray. Are they required to draw the water up their nose and wash their hands? First of all, for the drawing of the water up the nose, this hadith, what does it, in the apparent sense, what does it indicate to you? What do you think? That whenever you get up from your sleep, the hadith doesn't mention wudu. The hadith doesn't mention wudu. And therefore it indicates to you that whenever you wake up from your sleep at night, that you have slept during the night, you should draw water up your nose, you should clean your mouth, you should make a madmada, you should draw water up your nose, and you should expel water from your nose. However, there is a wording, and if I'm not mistaken, in Sahih al-Bukhari, that indicates that this hadith is related to wudu. And what I believe to be the correct opinion in this matter is that actually, as an obligation, it is only related to wudu. And as a wajib, it's only related to wudu. But as something mustahab, then there is no doubt that when you wake up from sleep, the scholars said, look, what is the illah here? What is the reason? The shaitan goes to sleep. The shaitan spends the night here. And therefore, if the shaitan spends the night there, you need to do it whether you are intending to do wudu or whether you are not intending to do wudu. But the statement that it is wajib to do outside of wudu, it seems to be a little bit weak because of the hadith in the wording in Bukhari that relates this hadith to wudu. So what we say is the balanced opinion, or the way to balance between these two things, is to say that it is wajib in wudu and that it is mustahab when you wake up outside of wudu. So it's mustahab when you wake up to use the siwak, to make madmada, to swill the water around in your mouth to get the smell out of your mouth, and to draw water up your nose and spill it out, even if you do not intend to make wudu. This is something mustahab, it's something recommended. However, it is only an obligation inside of the wudu, I think this is al-ahwat, this is the fairest and the most balanced opinion in this regard. And this is the opinion of Shaykh Fawzan Hafidhullah. And this seems to me to be the most balanced opinion in this regard. Because to say that it is wajib outside of wudu, when we gather together the wordings of this hadith, it doesn't give us a lot of strength to the statement that it's wajib outside of wudu. However, the illah, the reason for doing it, is still present. And so we say that there is still a reason to do it outside of wudu. Yes, it's an obligation in wudu, but there's still a reason, there's still a cause to do it outside of wudu, because nobody wants the shaitan to be residing around them or within them. As for the Prophet ﷺ informing us regarding the shaitan and where the shaitan stays and where the shaitan spends the night, then this is from the ghaib which the Prophet ﷺ told us about. And this is something that is a fundamental part of our belief that Muhammad ﷺ is the messenger of Allah. What is the belief that Muhammad ﷺ is the messenger of Allah? It breaks down into 3 things. تصديقه فيما أخبر وطاعته فيما أمر وأن لا يعبد الله إلا بما شرع. That you obey him in what he commanded you to do. That you believe, first of all, that you believe in what he told you about. That you obey him in what he commanded you to do. And you only worship Allah in the way that he showed you how to do it. So these three fundamental things that make up that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the messenger of Allah. That we must believe in what he told us about. Someone may say, how can the shaitan be in my nostrils? How is it the shaitan can be in my nostrils? Because as-sadiqul masduq sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the one who told the truth and the one who is believed, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam told you the shaitan spends the night in your nostrils. How does that happen? Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. This is amrun ghaybi. It is a matter of the ghaib. And believing in the ghaib is a fundamental part of our belief as a Muslim. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ. Those people who believe in the unseen. The Prophet ﷺ told you in a hadith of the highest authenticity, in a hadith of the highest authenticity, in Bukhari and Muslim, that the shaitan spends the night in your nostrils. How that happens is known by Allah Azza wa Jal, and the Prophet ﷺ was informed about it happening. But as for us, what we must do is believe what the Messenger ﷺ told us, along with obeying him and only worshipping Allah in the way that he showed us. And this is what makes up the meaning of Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So we said that this is a matter of the unseen, and that this is something that as a Muslim we have to believe in and we have to accept. And it's also well known that the nostrils and the nose is a place of the gathering of a lot of unclean things. And the shaitan is no doubt attracted to those areas and places of the body that are unclean, or that are, places that have some dirt and some uncleanliness in them. So there is no doubt that from the asbab, from the causes which are in the dunya and the causes which are from the ghaib that we can't see, that there's every reason for you to clear your nose. I remember speaking to a friend of mine who is a consultant in ENT, ear, nose and throat. And he mentioned that the benefits of al-istinshaq and al-istinthar, of bringing the water up and out of your nose, there are many, many, many benefits, huge benefits for you. And he said this is something he recommends for all of his patients to do when they have nose operations, when they have problems with their nose, that they draw water in and blow water out, because there's a lot of bacteria, a lot of things end up inside of the nose and the sinuses, and it's all connected. And the fact that it goes down to a kind of a single system going into the whole body, subhanallah, it has a lot of things get in there. And it's not difficult to understand that the shaitan may pick this place for a place of residence at night. If we look at the second hadith and then we try and join them together, if one of you wakes from his sleep, let him not, فَلَا يَغْمِسْ, فَلَا, let him not. This is a prohibition. And we have another usuli principle, another principle of usul al-fiqh. النهي يفيد التحريم. The prohibition indicates that something is haram. So unless we have a dalil that this prohibition is to make it makruh, or this prohibition is to discourage you from doing it, then the basic principle is that every prohibition in the sunnah is intended to be something haram, until you have an evidence to say that it isn't. So the basic principle is every command is there to tell you it's wajib, and every prohibition is there to tell you that it's haram. Do not put your hands. Yaghmis means to submerge. It means to submerge. Don't submerge your hands. And the meaning of al-yad here is al-kaf. The meaning of al-yad here is the hand rather than the arm. The meaning of yad here is al-kaf. And there is a fa'idah, there is a benefit in this, which is interesting reason we can understand for it. Meaning there's no reason why you wash your hands 3 times in the morning when you wake up, except to show your obedience to Allah. We can divide the things we are asked to do in Islam into 2 categories. The things which are ta'abbudi, they are done to show your obedience to Allah without us knowing the reason for doing them. And the things that have a clear reason for them, and we know the reason, or we know at least one reason or one wisdom as to why we do something. And I'll give you an example just to clarify. A person is making wudu. They're making wudu and they've washed all the parts of their body and their hands are wet. Their feet are wet, their face is wet. They have completely made their wudu as they should. At that point, while the person is dripping with water, they break wind. What do they have to do? They have to wash their hands again, and their mouth again, and their face again, and their arms again, and their feet again. Did anything happen to their face, arms and feet during the time that they were covered in water from top to bottom? Nothing. Therefore we say this is amrul ta'abbudi. This is for us to be careful and cautious that the water reaches every place. And you see sometimes some of us, and we all sometimes are guilty of this, that we go to make wudu and we do it very quickly and we don't really care whether the water reaches everywhere, splash here, splash there, and then you're done. And this contradicts this hadith. Asbigh al-wudu. Make the wudu thoroughly. Let's see what the translation we have on this one. We have here, perform perfect wudu. But I think that there's a more technical description we can say there. We can say that perform a thorough wudu. I think the word of asbigh al-wudu, be thorough in your wudu. Make sure that the water is reaching everywhere. And again, in this, there is a haram on both sides. There is a haram on both sides. The haram we are talking about here is not performing isbagh al-wudu, allowing areas of the body not of the areas that you're supposed to wash not to get wet. And the Prophet ﷺ said, وَيْلٌ لِلْأَعْقَابِ مِنَ النَّارِ. Woe to the people who leave off their heels in wudu, that they will be punished from the hellfire. So it's a very serious matter that you don't take care of the areas that you make wudu, and you don't care that there are areas of wudu that you're not covering, you're not washing properly, and you're not washing thoroughly. So it's quite a serious thing. So the first issue is asbigh al-wudu. وَخَلِّلْ بَيْنَ الْأَصَابِعِ. And khallil means to run your finger in between the gaps in the fingers and the toes. Now, to understand this, we have to understand that there is no disagreement among the scholars that it is wajib, rather it is a condition or it is a pillar of the wudu for the water to reach everywhere. And the water has to reach in between your fingers. Doing this with your small finger is a sunnah. And doing this or like this is a sunnah. However, it is wajib for the water to get there. If the water doesn't get there by just opening your fingers, and especially with your feet, it doesn't get there by just opening your toes, then you must wujub, and you must put your finger in between. You must put your finger in between. If the water reaches, then putting your finger in between is a sunnah. However, you must get the water to reach in between the fingers and in between the toes. And if the water does not reach in between the fingers and does not reach in between the toes, then the wudu is invalid. So again, this is another thing about being careful. And there's another benefit in this, and this benefit is that it's not about how much water you use, but it's about how you use that water. It's not about how much water you use. Sheikh Fawzan mentioned that some people use a huge amount of water, but still end up with parts of their arms and hands not wet. For example, in between the fingers or in between the toes. And this person may go to the other extreme. We said there's two extremes. We're talking about not making isbagh al-wudu. The second extreme is israf in wudu. Israf is exaggeration in wudu, which means washing more than 3 times. So you see somebody washes their hands 5 times and still they did not get any water in between their fingers or in between their toes. So the Prophet ﷺ used to make wudu, as we said, with 750 mil approximately. Some of the scholars said 500, some said 750. I think the stronger is 750. But in any case, he used to make wudu with 750 mil of water. With that water, he would wash all of the parts 3 times except wiping over the head and the ears, which is only once. With 750 mil of water. It's not how much water you use, but it's how you use it. And that is the benefit from وَخَلِّلْ بَيْنَ الْأَصَابِعِ. Run your finger between your fingers and toes. Asabi' means fingers and asabi' means toes. Both of them are called asabi'. So you run your finger between them like this. And however you do it, whether you do it like this, or whether you do it like this, but ideally you use the smallest finger and you run your finger in between in order to make sure that the water gets everywhere. And so this is an evidence or a lesson for us that it doesn't matter how much water you use, but it matters how you use it. If you're using the water in the wrong way, your wudu may well be invalid, even though you are using more water than a person whose wudu is valid. So very important that we don't rush wudu. At the same time, there are some people who get afflicted by waswasa or wiswas, and they go to another extreme, which is that you see them washing their hand, and for the 10th time they're washing their hand, and like they take it to an exaggeration. When you are suffering from this, the basic principle is in this case that you do not, the basic principle in this case is you do not listen to the waswasa, and you suffice yourself with 3 times whether you have washed or not. And this is an exception to the rule. Normally, you are careful to make sure when you have a problem of waswas, you are still careful, but only within the 3 times. You never ever go above, because what is happening is shaitan is causing you to go to do more than the allowed amount in the sunnah. Shaitan is whispering to you and causing you to go against the sunnah and to fall into a bid'ah, an innovation of israf in wudu, of using too much water in wudu. So it's quite, we have to be quite careful. We don't fall short and we don't go to an exaggeration. We don't fall short so that we have parts, key parts as we said, between the fingers, between the toes, the bottom of the foot, the heel. These are key areas that people don't usually wash properly in wudu. And then after that, we should not also go to an exaggeration. From the exaggeration is making wudu 4 times or more than 3 times. And from exaggeration are washing parts of the body that are not intended to be washed, like the neck. This is from al-israf and al-bid'ah, from the innovation in wudu, that people wash their neck, or the people who wash parts of the body that they were not told to wash. Like you see someone washing their legs all the way up to their knees. And these are things, subhanAllah, you see them, subhanAllah musta'an, you see people washing their all the way up past their shins and up to their knees. And this is something, again, that you have not been commanded to do. So you do what you've been commanded to do, and you do it thoroughly, and you do it carefully. وَبَالِغْ فِي الْإِسْتِنْشَاقِ. And baligh, the normal, sometimes we would say something like exaggerate. But I think the meaning of this is not exaggerate as such, but the meaning of this is be very thorough in al-istinshaq. Baligh means to reach the utmost level that you can reach, or to reach the furthest part of the nose. So you make every effort when you are doing istinshaq to make sure that the water goes all the way up the nose, not that the water just ends here, like you see some people do, just like this, that you draw the water all the way up the nose, as much as you can. But there is an exception to this. إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ صَائِمًا, unless you are fasting. So you bring the water up the nose, you reach the utmost part of the nose that you can reach, and you draw as far up the nose as you possibly can. unless you are fasting. And that also applies to the gargling. And I believe there's a wording, and I didn't find it here, but as I recall from my memory only, that there is a wording, وَبَالِغْ فِي الْمَضْمَضَةِ وَالْإِسْتِنْشَاقِ, and exaggerate or be thorough in madmada and istinshaq, yani in the mouth and the nose. So that in the mouth means to gargle the water in your mouth. Again, not if you're fasting. There's another benefit in this with regard to fasting, and I think this benefit is really important and something we should be really careful of. This hadith contains being cautious in the matter of fasting and not being easygoing in the matter of fasting. And it's true that in this day and age, many of us have unfortunately become very easygoing about fasting. And there are a lot of fatwa that make it very easygoing. Yeah, you can brush your teeth, you can do this, you can do this, you can do, you can use toothpaste, you can use mouth freshener, and these have a basis. And these are not opinions that have come from thin air. These are opinions that have been given by scholars and fatwa have been given. However, what does this hadith teach you? If istinshaq is wajib, and the Prophet ﷺ is saying when you are fasting, don't draw the water too far up your nose, then what about the things that are less of an obligation than istinshaq? There's no doubt that we should be cautious. Now, I'm not saying never use toothpaste when you're fasting. I'm not saying that never ever, but I'm saying that if you ask me, it is better that you avoid using toothpaste when fasting because of this hadith. Because this hadith gives us a fundamental principle of being cautious with things that might break your fast. As you know, toothpaste kind of lingers in your mouth for a very long time. It takes a very long time to get it out. Now there's no doubt if you brush your teeth and spit it out, there's nothing goes down your throat, then your fast doesn't break. Nobody disagrees that if you put something in your mouth, if I put a rock in my mouth and just sit there with a rock in my mouth and spit it out 10 minutes later, it doesn't break my fast. But if there is a danger with something that it's likely to break your fast, or that it's expected that sometimes you would break your fast, and I think toothpaste is one of the really main things on this, because it lingers in the mouth for so long, the taste is there for so long, it stays there for a long time. I'm sure it's probably made to stay there for a long time. It hangs around within your mouth for a long time. It can be extremely difficult to stop yourself swallowing it. And so, based upon this hadith, and we're not saying it's haram, but based upon this hadith, doesn't this hadith indicate to us that we should be cautious when it comes to fasting, and a bit careful when it comes to things that might break our fast, and doing things that are somewhat unnecessary? Use a siwak without the toothpaste. Again, someone says, what about a flavored siwak? Where they add like a flavor in there, like lemon flavor or something like that. Again, better for you. We're not talking about haram, but better for you that you don't put your fast at risk. Because if you don't put your fast at risk with istinshaq, and it is the most deserving thing for you to put your fast at risk for, and there's nothing more deserving than istinshaq and madmada, than swilling the water in the mouth and drawing the water up the nose, because these two are wajib. But if the Prophet ﷺ said don't do it more than the minimum when you're fasting, then likewise you should have the same attitude when it comes to other things that might break your fast. Yes, if you feel that you really are struggling and your breath is really, really strong smelling and you need to put something in there to get rid of it, you can use toothpaste. It doesn't break your fast. But it's certainly better for you to have, instead of the easygoing, it's the attitude that I'm talking about. It's not the issue of toothpaste, but the attitude of, there's a fatwa, it doesn't break my fast, there's a fatwa for this, there's a fatwa for that, this is halal, this is halal, this is halal. Try to avoid things that could potentially put your fast at risk, even if they are things that are in themselves permissible, but there is a risk that they could put your fast at risk. And likewise, this hadith contains the importance of you being cautious in your wudu, but not letting that caution reach the level of wiswas, of confusion. If it reaches the level of wiswas, do it as well as you can, but only do it 3 times. If you're suffering from waswasa, Do it as well as you can within the 3. We're not saying just splash your hands, do it as well as you can, but only do it 3 times. Even if you see, oh, but I've left a piece. If you know that you suffer from the shaitan whispering to you, do it 3 times and that is it. Do it 3 times and that's enough, inshallah ta'ala. So these are some of the benefits from this hadith. These ahadith contain a lot of supplementary benefits, a lot of important benefits. But there's one more wording, I just missed it from the end of the hadith. وَلِأَبِي دَاوُدْ فِي رِوَايَةٍ أو في رواية إِذَا تَوَضَّأْتَ فَمَضْمِضْ. If you make wudu, then make madmada. Again, why is the author mentioning the madmada and the istinshaq again? To prove that they are wajib. So the purpose of this hadith in this bab here in Bab al-Wudu is to prove that drawing the water into the nose and drawing the water into the mouth are wajib and not sunnah. Some of the scholars of Islam from the madahib, they said that it is a sunnah. Why? They said because it's not mentioned in the ayah. But the ayah mentions the face, which includes the mouth and the nose, and the sunnah clarifies that the mouth and the nose are wajib. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Baligh fil istinshaq." You must go to a big length or a huge length when you are drawing the water up your nose. And in a narration from Abu Dawood, إِذَا تَوَضَّأْتَ فَمَضْمِضْ. If you make wudu, then swill the water around your mouth. Do the madmada, swill the water around your mouth. So it's quite important that we bear these things in mind and we understand the ruling of each of those, and we are careful with our wudu. We don't rush our wudu too much. At the same time, use a bit of fiqh. And the last point I'll mention, today I went for Maghrib and I needed to make wudu, and the iqama went, and I was probably second in line for next for the taps. There was a queue. At that time, use a bit of fiqh. That's not the time to sit down when there's a queue of 5 people and the iqama just went for Maghrib, to sit down and start Bismillah. Inspecting your hands, running it under 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, done. That is not the time to do it. Use a bit of sense, because subhanAllah, you have 3-4 people waiting behind you. If you don't make wudu relatively quickly, they will miss the salah, because Maghrib is very short. They will miss the salah, and so it is better that you make wudu well, but not excessively long. But when when you're on your own in your house, you have a little bit of time. There's nothing wrong with taking a little time in wudu. Again, between 2 extremes, not an extreme that you are taking an amount of time that leads you to waswasa, because it does. If you start taking too long for wudu, you end up getting serious waswasa. I mean, some people make wudu for 5 whole minutes and they are still making wudu, and you're thinking, subhanallah, that's a long time to make wudu. And some people make wudu in 10 seconds and you think, really, did you actually manage to make wudu in that time? You fear that there's a lot of splashing and not a lot of washing going on, and not a lot of caution that the water is reaching everywhere on the limb or the part of the body. So it's about being in the middle. وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Like this, we have made you a middle ummah. In the middle. Don't go to an extreme on one side or the other, but definitely use your fiqh. I think, subhanallah, there are 2 times when I really feel that people should show their fiqh. Number 1, when you have a long queue for the wudu, don't go to an extreme in taking your time. If you wash 1 time or 2 times, it's enough. Do each limb 2 times. If you can do it 3 times, no problem. But if you see it's a long queue, do each limb 2 times and give an opportunity for the next person. The Prophet ﷺ did it once, did it 2 times, did it 3 times. Secondly, when there's little water. There are some places where the water is filled from a tank, or where the water is, you're making water from a small bottle, or there is, maybe there's a liter bottle of water and there's 5 of you who need to make wudu from it. That's not the time to be washing each limb 3 times with, dripping wet. That's the time to be sensible about the water you have. Wash each limb once, but make sure the water reaches. If you think it didn't reach, wash it 1 more time. Use a bit of common sense and a bit of understanding about what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. You must cover the entire limb in water. apart from the wiping of the head, which you must cover the entire head with wet hands and the ears. You must cover it with water. You can do it once or twice or 3 times. 3 times is the best, followed by twice, followed by 1 time, as long as the water covers all of the required parts. So use that to your advantage when you see there's a big queue for the wudu, or when you see there's very little water. I remember, like I said, I think I mentioned to you last time, we were at Hajj, and you're in Muzdalifah, and you can see there's the only thing you have is a drip. You don't even have a tap, you just have a drip, 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 drip. It's just dripping. You can make wudu with it. You can make wudu with a tap that's dripping. You have to stay a long time, but you can put your hand underneath and get enough water out of it to be able to make your wudu. But you have to be a bit sensible about how often you're washing each part and what you're doing with your water, and that the water is reaching every place. It's about being a bit sensible about it and about learning the limits properly, inshaAllah ta'ala. We still have a number of ahadith before we reach Bab al-Masah al-Khuffayn, at least another couple of weeks worth of ahadith, inshaAllah ta'ala. But we are getting there, and inshallah, hopefully we're learning and implementing what we learn. SubhanAllah, I remember even listening to this topic of wudu today, it reminded me of the statement of Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. كُلَّمَا أَدَّبَنِ الدَّهْرُ أَرَانِي نَقْصَ أَقْلِي وَإِذَا مَا زِدْتُ عِلْمًا زَادَنِي عِلْمًا بِجَهْلِي. And Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, every time that time corrects me, it shows me the deficiency of my intellect. And every time I'm asked about a question, it only increases me, or it increases me in knowledge of my own ignorance. SubhanAllah, we studied this book, or we studied Al-Muharrar, which is a very similar book, in so much detail, and the masail, and the opinions of the scholars. And still today, while I was revising this topic before I came to you, I learned maybe 5 or 6 things that I didn't know about wudu before now. Despite having studied the best part of 4 years studying this book, and the best part of a term studying Bab al-Wudu, and full time. And still, subhanAllah, listening to these or revising this topic in the car, I came across 3, 4, 5 masail that did not occur to me, or that I did not remember studying in this issue. So there's never a person who says, I've done it, I know how to make wudu now, I know all of the masail, I know everything that I need to do. And you can still benefit a great deal from going over the topics, teaching them to your family, passing that knowledge on, and in a practical way. Take some water, show them the wudu that Uthman radiallahu anhu made, and show them the rulings with regarding to the madmada and the istinshaq, and the rulings with regard to washing the hands, and teach your kids when they wake up from sleep to wash their hands and rinse their noses. And this is something, inshallah, that you can learn through teaching and spreading the message to others, inshallah. So we wrap up there. Jazakumullahu khairan wa barakallahu feekum. Wallahu a'lam wa salatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.